guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're looking at Audi's brand new S3 Sportback. Before we start the review, I just want to say a massive shout out and thanks to everyone for the support I've had in 2020. The views and the subscriber count have literally been going through the roof. I'm actually earning enough money off YouTube now to live, survive and continue shooting content. So thanks so much. If you haven't pressed the subscribe button already, please do, and also hit the bell icon so you know when I've uploaded new videos. This is actually the fourth generation of Audi's S3 based on their brand new A3. I remember the first generation back in '99. It was actually one of my dream cars back then, a real pin-up car. I've always loved hot hatches, as most of you know, and that was just a special car. 1.8 litre, turbocharged, 4-pot, produced just over 200 horsepower. It was Audi's Quattro system, although it's the Haldex system on these smaller cars. And it was an absolute rocket ship of its time. It was a real original hot hatch, if you like. I loved it because it was subtle enough to sort of fly under the radar, but those that knew. It had things like the chrome wing mirrors, unique alloy wheels, slightly bigger exhaust around the back, and you could just tell from the styling and the seats that it was something a step up from the normal A3 at the time. The second generation S3 came out in 2006, and in fact it still looks fairly modern today. It had a slightly bigger engine, a 2-litre 4-cylinder turbocharged unit, which is very similar to the one that's in this car, giving it 265 horsepower, again Haldex 4-wheel drive system, but this time was offered with an S-tronic gearbox, and with that S-tronic gearbox it had a quoted 0-62 figure of 5.5 seconds, which is still quick today, let alone 15 odd years ago. Fast forward to 2013 and Audi gave us the third generation of their S3, which preceded this particular car. It still retained the 2-litre 4-cylinder turbocharged engine, slightly modified and up to around 300 horsepower. If you tick the S-tronic box in that car, it gave you a quoted 0-62 figure of 4.8 seconds, which was really, really rapid. The last generation you could get in a 3-door hatchback, a 5-door sportback. You could also get it in a saloon for the first time, which you can with the new car, and Audi offered a S3 Cabriolet. So there was quite a few different options. On top of all of that, you had the manual and S-tronic or automatic gearbox option on most of those models. Let's talk about the fourth generation car that we have in front of us. So we still have the 2-litre 4-cylinder turbocharged engine under the bonnet. I think it's the EA888 that the Volkswagen Audi group have had in their range for quite some time now. Obviously it gets better and better, the power keeps going up, it becomes a bit more efficient. This one now produces around 310 horsepower and 400 newton meters of torque. As talked about, it will only go through Audi's 7-speed dual clutch gearbox, and it retains the Quattro system or Haldex system as it is in this particular A3 platform. This car has a quoted 0-62 figure of 4.8 seconds, so very similar to the previous generation, which we will be testing very soon. I have a feeling it will go a bit quicker than that because it certainly feels it from first impressions. There are 2 trim levels available on the new S3 in the UK. This base model, which is £38,500 on the road, there will also be a Vorsprung model, which in line with the rest of the Audi range basically has all of the options thrown at it, so top of the range. I haven't got a confirmed retail price for that car, but I'm guessing it's going to be about £5,000 more than this, so let's say in the region of 43 grand, but that is complete guesswork. This being a UK press car, it has had a couple of options thrown at it. So we've got the upgraded 19-inch alloys. It comes standard with 18-inch. I've got a Bang & Olufsen sound system in there. The most obvious is probably this pretty leery but cool turbo blue paintwork that the flies seem to love. It also has things like the Matrix LED headlamps around the front. This car has a recommended retail price of just over 41 grand, which is a lot of money for a hatchback. But when you compare it to cars like the M135i or the A35, it actually sits exactly right, spec for spec. The saloon version of the new S3 is about £500 more, but I've actually been told that makes it cheaper than the car that it replaces. In terms of styling cues for the new S3, well, I've had a picture of this car on my Instagram for the past 3 or 4 days. follow me on Instagram if you don't already. It's just Joe Achilles. You'll always see up and coming cars that are going to be on the channel. And I've seen quite a few people complaining about the fact that it looks too much like a regular A3 with a bit of S-line trim or black edition or whatever they call it these days. To me, that's always kind of been what an S3 is, though. It's a subtle car. It's not shouting about what it is. A bit like that S8 that I had recently. It could fly under the radar as a regular A8, but yet it's punching some serious firepower. I think the RS3 is reserved for, you know, bigger arches and far more aggressive body kit. This is just subtle. It's not shouting too much about what it does, and it really does fly under the radar, especially if you didn't opt for this turbo blue paintwork. But there are some subtle signs that do tell us this is the S3. The door mirror caps in a chrome colour. Well, that's hark back to the original and first generation of the S3. I really love them. If you go around the front, we've actually now got some chrome bits on the grille, which is unique to the S3. There is some more aggressive sort of air intakes, although being an Audi, there are a few fake ones around here. We've got nice little chrome style splitter down there. We've actually got some chrome side skirts as well, which look really good. I think it all complements each other really well. This has got the optional 19-inch alloys, but it comes with some unique S3 18-inch alloys, and in fact the front brake calipers have got S3 written on them, just in case you didn't know. Once we get around the back of the car, we've got this lovely boot spoiler, and as we look further down, I can see, well, there's plenty of fake vents and there's a rather fake looking rear diffuser there, but there are 4 exhaust pipes, and I can report that they're real exhaust pipes. So well done, Audi. Thanks so much for giving us them. I'm really relieved. Again, that's a question that's been asked a lot on my Instagram feed, and I can report they are genuine exhaust pipes. Right, let's jump inside and have a look what the cabin's all about before we take it out on this gorgeous November day. Typically a beautiful Audi cabin. Really is good in here, and I think, in fact, in terms of layout at least, this is the best modern Audi on the road. They haven't gone too crazy with the touchscreen. We've got the single screen here, a bit like you do in most cars these days, but underneath that, and most importantly to me, there are plenty of buttons. If I want my bum warming, I just press a button. So there's buttons where I think there should be buttons, and you've got your touchscreen for your 12-year-olds to satisfy all your tech people, etc. We've got a virtual cockpit in front of us, which is not the best virtual cockpit that Audi offer. It reminds me very much of the one that was in the previous generation Golf R. The graphics aren't that great, and to be fair, I'd much rather be looking at some decent analog dials, but I can't complain. There's lots of viewing options on there, and you can bring up most things. What it doesn't have the option of is a head-up display, which you can get in the M135i, and that's a little bit of a shame in something so premium. Looking down here, well, we've got a funny little gear selector, a bit like the one that's in a 911, 992 generation. And in fact, in a lot of the current Porsche lineup, not sure how I feel about it. At least it kind of minimizes things and gives you a bit more space around here. We've got some fairly usable cup holders, the best ones that I've experienced in the A3 anyway. We've got a nice little cubby hole down there, reasonable sized glove box, good size door bins and stuff. So it's a really nice practical cabin. In terms of driving position, massive step up over the previous generation. It really is good. I feel very comfortable. I'm sitting low enough. It's fantastic. I have to say that driving position wise, they've got it spot on. I've got a lovely sort of S steering wheel in front of me, which is very similar, if not identical, to the one that was in that R8 I had recently. In fact, it uses the same paddles that I complained about in that R8, and they do feel a little bit cheap in this, but this is something that costs, you know, just under 40 grand, so I guess you can get away with them. The seats are fantastic. The seats are really good. I might be wrong, but they feel like they've got somewhat larger than the previous generation S3 and RS3 seats, so they fit me really well. The headrest is where my head is, and yeah, I love them. You know, I'm 6'4". I usually complain about things like seats and cabin space, but in here it's really, really nice. If you start scratching around, you do find some cheaper plastics in here, but you've got to remember this is based on an A3, which is a very affordable hatchback, and there's only so many things they can do to change it and bring it up to the S3 level. Aesthetically it looks beautiful in here, but I really do think that fit and finish is not in line with BMW's 1 Series and M135i. This base spec S3 comes with a lot of standard equipment. These gorgeous sports seats we've just talked about, including the Napa leather front and back. We've got some LED headlamps up front. We've got this lovely leather steering wheel. We've got dual zone climate control, sat nav, cruise control. We've got parking sensors at the back. It's a shame it doesn't have a rear camera. I'm so used to rear cameras now that when I first got this, I thought there was something broken because it wasn't showing me anything, but sensors are good enough, and I'm sure you can option the rear camera. What this doesn't have, and something I do enjoy, is a panoramic sunroof, but that is an option on this base spec car. I think it's just over £1,000, so that's really cool that you can opt for that. I'm really excited about seeing what this new S3 is all about behind the wheel. S3s have always been beautiful places to sit and beautiful objects to look at, but they've been a little bit numb to drive. Very fast in a straight line, but just not that exciting. I've heard this new model is far better. What's it like on a typical British B road? Well, normally I'd start my review in comfort, and that's what I'm in at the moment, but that's not going to make any difference to the suspension setup on this car because it doesn't have magnetic ride or adaptive suspension. And in fact, that's not an option on the base S3, unfortunately. If you want that, you're going to have to go for the Vorsprung model that comes with everything. It's a little bit of a shame because I think that's going to be a popular option for the spirited driver. But saying that, I've had this car about 4 days now, and I've done a lot of driving in it along roads like this, on the M25, in London traffic, and I have to say that the passive setup is actually really good, especially when you bear in mind that this is on the optional 19-inch wheels, so it almost has rubber band type tyres, and the ride quality is actually really, really good. The last car I drove along this particular bit of road was the new M5 Competition, and that was a lot harsher. In fact, it felt a lot stiffer than this car, so I can't really complain about this passive setup. But anyway, let's get it out of comfort and into dynamic. Okay, we're over in dynamic now, and I've pulled one of the paddles to let the car know that I want to do the shifting. The first thing that you notice is the extra sound, and that's usually the case when you go into a sportier mode in a hot hatch or a sports car, but there's something very bizarre about this one. Let's just listen. Now, to me, that sounds very much like a 5-cylinder lump, so I think that's being piped around the cabin. It's not a bad sound, but very bizarre that this sounds like an RS3 when it isn't. Ignoring that rather confusing sound, the 2-litre 4-cylinder turbocharged engine definitely does a good job. It's really torquey, it's really powerful up the top end. It doesn't mind revving too much. In fact, it revs a lot better than the engine it sounds like, the 2.5 litre 5-cylinder. It's mated to this 7-speed dual clutch gearbox, which actually works really well. Like, it tends to give you gears whenever you ask for them. whether you're changing up or changing down. But just like in the Golf GTI and I think the Golf R as well, unfortunately, you never really get a full manual mode. So I'm in 4th gear now at 2000 RPM. I'm in manual, supposedly it says M4. When I put my foot down on the floor, it's gonna jump down a few gears. So watch this. Now it's 2nd. I didn't ask for 2nd. I was in 4th, and that really frustrates me. And it doesn't just do that when you want to accelerate or kick down, it also does it when you get to the top of the rev range. So let's change into 1st here, put my foot down, it's changing. That's not me changing, that's the gearbox changing, which is frustrating, especially when you're on track. In fact, I was lucky to take that GTI TCR out at Portimao a couple of years ago, and I remember that being the most frustrating thing about that car is the fact that although you're supposedly in manual, it takes over the shifting if it thinks you're going to go near the red line, and that is frustrating. I know you shouldn't be bouncing it off the red line, but at the same time there is a rev limiter there for a purpose, and that allows you to occasionally touch it and do the shifting yourself. Because what ends up happening is you come into something like this, into 2nd, come through here, nice little left-hander, put your foot down, it changes, and then you could pull the paddle and it would change again. So you go from 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and it's just frustrating, especially on a track day. Okay, launch control on Audi's brand new S3. It has a claim 0 to 62 figure of 4.8 seconds. My race box is set up and ready to go. I'm in dynamic. I've turned all of the traction aids off because this has got all-wheel drive and it's not too slippery outside, so we shouldn't have any issues with traction. Left foot hard down on the brake, right foot on the accelerator. It holds it at 4,000 RPM, and here we go. 4.48 seconds. Wow, that is seriously fast. That's to 62 miles an hour as well, so probably 4.4 to 60, well under its claimed figure. That's over 0.3 of a second under its claimed figure. Now we know this is a very quick car. 4.5 seconds to 62 miles an hour, come rain or shine, is just ridiculous. You don't want your hot hatch to be much quicker than that. We know the engine's very good, as I've talked about. It's reasonably efficient as well. I think they claim a combined figure of about 36, and I've managed around 30 with some mixed driving. I think that figure will go down today after this review. And the cabin itself, what's it like to spend time in this car? Well, it's actually really nice. You know, there are some cheaper plastics in here, as I've talked about, but when you remind yourself that you're in effectively an A3, it is really nice. These seats are very comfortable, they're very supportive as well. There's plenty of space in here. It does seat 5, but you could get 4 big adults in here without any issues. I fit in either of the side seats at the back there. So in terms of a proposition to live with, it is a really nice bit of kit. Do I think it's good value at around £40,000? Well, I do when you compare it to other cars in the market. We'll talk about its rivals in a second, but what you've got to remember, unfortunately, with Audis is you tend not to get too much of a discount. So although this is very similar price to, let's say, an M135i spec for spec, when you actually go down to your dealer and you ask them for a finance quote, you'll probably find this is going to be at least £50–60 more a month, just because you don't get that initial discount that you do with an M135i. In terms of comparing, let's say, its closest rivals, so the M135i, the A35 from Mercedes, and well, Volkswagen Golf's latest Mark 8R that was announced a couple of days ago, it's really hard to say whether it's better outright or worse than the others. I think it's got its strengths and it's got its weaknesses. What I have to say is this new S3 is far more entertaining and far more engaging than any other S3 that I've driven. And in fact, it's actually, aside from its sound, which does sound like the 5-cylinder, aside from its sound, it's actually a far more interesting and exciting car to drive along a road like this than the previous generation RS3 that's just gone out of production. That was a good car, but I always just found it was a little bit numb, and I never really trusted its Haldex setup, whereas the setup in this one just seems to be a bit better. I've always got everything switched off in these cars because the crazy Haldex system has caught me out a few times in previous RS3s and stuff, and if you leave the traction control systems on when it starts understeering, they actually intervene and make things worse. So I always turn everything off, because at least that way you can gather up something that goes wrong. It'll be interesting to see what the new Golf R is like, because if history repeats, it should be more involving and exciting compared with this, and that's going to take some beating. So really keen to try that. I know it has a gimmicky drift mode, God knows what that does, but I suppose they had to put that in to compete with cars like the A35S, which is obviously in a different price bracket. But really keen to see what the new Golf R is all about. So if any of you guys watching have got one coming and fancy lending it to me, that would be great, because I might be waiting a long time to get a UK press car. Let's just finish with a little bit of spirited driving. I'll talk you through what I'm feeling. Changed down really nicely there, plenty of pickup. Again, really nice change down, almost to the red line. It's really greasy through there, but the traction out of these corners, just amazing, really is. You don't feel any rotation mid-corner now if I put my foot down, but I haven't felt too much understeer today, and that is a very good thing. It's very good on the brakes, and as we talked about at the start of the video, this passive suspension setup is actually really good. I'm not sort of on this road going, oh, I wish it was a little bit softer sprung, which is normally what I think when I go along this stretch of road. It's actually really good, and it feels good on long journeys, as I say. So I think this passive setup is fantastic. I'm really excited about trying a 4-sprung model in a few months' time to see what the magnetic ride's all about, because if it's any better than this, then it's going to have a really sorted chassis and suspension system. Guys, thanks a lot for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Please give us a thumbs up if you did. Also remember to subscribe and hit the bell icon if you haven't already. Leave any comments and questions below. I'm sure you agree this new S3 is a pretty impressive bit of kit. Yes, it looks a little bit ordinary on the outside, but that's kind of the point of S models. They're not here to shout about things, they're here to do what they're meant to do, and this car does it better than any generation S3 that I've driven. Real good bit of kit. Cheers. But I'm on my own, so I don't really care. This is for the sound sync.